This is what they wanted to do with our father. They wanted to show that if they can kidnap one of the main opposition or critic of the government, they would silence Rwandans inside and outside of the country. We have power over you. And on top of that, you know what? We can sponsor all these clubs. We can continue going to these big forums of Davos and others. And it's a way to try to break the people of their country so they don't fight. But what they don't know is that I think people don't get tired. I think people do want their freedom. And like us and like many others will not stop speaking up. At the end of the day, we want to be able to go back to our country one day. Yeah. The people inside Rwanda want to be truly free. It could take time, but it's not impossible.
All right. Carine, nice to see you. Anaïs, nice to see you again. With you a few days ago. So, a few years ago, I noticed Arsenal had a new sponsor on their sleeve, which was Visit Rwanda, which I thought was kind of odd at the time. I was like, wow, this is incredible. A country like Rwanda is wanted to promote tourism. It's an incredible thing. Seems like an expensive thing to do, but how progressive, how cool that an African country is promoting to go and visit it. A few years later, I'm at the Oslo Freedom Forum with your sister, and I what's the Canadian journalist's name?
Judy River.
Judy River, yes.
I see her presentation and about Rwanda explaining what's going on, and I realised this is sportswashing.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, I need to talk to you too. So I want to talk about that specifically, but I also want to go into the background because your background is incredible. Your story is incredible. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I want to raise awareness of this and whether the idea is true that we should be protesting to Arsenal and saying, you need to drop this. Because we spoke about it in Norway. Yes. I wasn't sure if it was a good or bad thing. Do we want tourism because it's good for the economy, or do we not want tourism because we don't want to promote a dictator?
Yes, it's a blurry line, right? Because at the end of the day, these strategies are not just economical, it's also soft power foreign policy, and it gets political. And because of that, I think that we have to be careful, because the campaign is a way to change the minds of people about what Rwanda is about. You know, many people know Rwanda as a country that endured a genocide in 1994, has a really sad history, actually a horrific history. And then after that, what you listen to Judy Rivers talk, which are the crimes that have been happening in the Congo over the last 30 years because of the Rwandan regime, have augmented so much that they are trying very hard to change an image of where you see this kind of, you change the way you see this sad country that's gone through a lot as a country of opportunities. In some ways, it is, you would think it's a good thing. But then when you look deeper, you wonder, well, would you want to have a Visit Russia on the Arsenal team?
No.
So it's the same thing. I'm sure there's a lot of beautiful places to go visit in Russia. I hear St. Petersburg is very beautiful. But, would you allow the space for that kind of advertisement in a time where Rwanda is invading another country, just like Russia has invaded Ukraine? And there's a double standard on that, right? And so we have to ask ourselves questions, why are they doing that?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to recognize what Rwanda is like today. Like Anaïs explained the image of Rwanda and the trajectory it's had since the genocide, rebuilding itself and so on after such an atrocious period. But the reality is that the current situation in Rwanda, it's a dictatorship. It's a brutal dictatorship. There is no freedom in the country. We could not be sitting in a cafe in Rwanda talking about the lack of freedom in the country. We would probably be imprisoned or accused of some made-up crimes just for having the conversation we're having around this table right now. There's no political opposition. There's no free press. There is a war being waged in the neighboring country of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So with all that being said, when Arsenal decides to take money from a dictatorship and put Visit Rwanda on their jersey, they're essentially promoting that dictatorship. They're promoting that type of of rule and the acts of human rights abuses that are being perpetrated in the country.
Here we go. Arsenal's current sleeve sponsor with Visit Rwanda began back in 2018, so it's 7 years now. Initially a 3-year deal. The deal was extended in 2021 and it's reportedly worth over £10 million a year. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. And remember, Rwanda receives a lot of money in foreign aid from the United Kingdom, and Rwanda is one of the poorest countries in the world. I think it's like number 25, number 26.
According to the World Bank.
According to the World Bank and other international organizations. There has been growth. I think I have to put a caveat. There has been growth compared to coming from a anarchy, a country where there's nothing. But this growth does not mean it's enough to be able to invest in these outside campaign when you could be investing this money in the people of the country, in our education, in our healthcare system, in our roads, in electrification in the poorest areas of the countries. I think that, many of us would think that's more important than having the Visit Rwanda on one of the richest clubs in Europe. And so it's really difficult to swallow and to understand how you can have both this campaign and also have the poverty that we have in our country. People wonder, like, why aren't you not investing this money in our country? Why don't you make us get better? But what's also very difficult, it's hard to see the actual tie to the investment in the campaign outside of Rwanda, Visit Rwanda, and actually the returns, and where the returns are going to the people. Is it making people's life better by having these tourists? I would argue not really, because if you still are not able to go to school, having British tourists is not going to make your life any better. But I think, we need to be asking Arsenal, like Carine said, why you're promoting such dictatorship, such country, because would you promote another country again, like Russia? And often, I think the response would be no.
I wouldn't promote France.
Exactly.
No, so how do you balance that idea that tourism can be good for Rwanda? It's good for people to go there. It's good for people to see it. And maybe even if they go educated, it's even better with the idea that this is essentially also blood money because of the war that's being waged in the Congo, which, by the way, I wasn't aware of until it was brought up at the Oslo Freedom Forum. How do you balance that?
It's hard. I love football, for instance, right? And as a young African woman, for me, I want to be proud of seeing, my country being seen by the rest of the world. It's rare that you'll see other African countries at such high level, seen by the rest of the world.
It's not just Arsenal, right?
It's not just Arsenal. You have Bayern Munich. They have PSG. They just signed in Madrid with Atletico Madrid. So that's 4 teams. We're talking about now, probably over $50 million in investment a year for this campaign. And also another thing too about the tourism. Rwanda is a place where if you come as an outsider, you're only allowed to see specific things. So when you come as a tourist, you'll see this country, the beautiful country, you'll see the nice road, they'll show you where to go, but you won't be able to actually freely see the country and visit and ask questions. They want you to see what they want you to see. You'll go see the amazing gorillas. We're really proud that our country is one of the few countries around the world that's still preserving the gorillas, but we have amazing parks, we have a lot of hills, and this countryside is beautiful, but there is more to the country. And when a tourist come, you want them to see the whole country. And this Visit Rwanda campaign is very targeted to show the international world a specific version of Rwanda that the regime wants you to see, which is not the reality of the country. So even this tourism idea, I think in theory, it's good, but if you can only come to London and see one specific aspect, one neighborhood of London, that's not really fair or to the tourists, but also a reality of a picture of what London is or the United Kingdom is. But then people would come back and think that, Rwanda is this beautiful country where you can buy your coffee and walk around freely compared to other, where there's not a lot of mess compared to some other African countries. But that's not the reality of our country. It's much bigger. It's more complex. And this campaign also tries to take away the complexity of the country and our history.
And it's a country you two can't travel back to at the moment. We should probably go back to the start, because people listening will know your story, but not perhaps know that they know your story. And by the way, I tried to watch Hotel Rwanda in preparation for this. I couldn't find it it's not on any streaming service at all.
Oh, I'm surprised. It's not on Netflix?
No, not on Netflix, not on Amazon Prime. It's on Amazon Prime US.
Yeah.
It's not on Amazon Prime. It's very hard to get hold of. I obviously know the film. I've seen the film. I know that's about your adoptive father.
Yes.
But I know it's going a long way back, but take me back to where you think the start of this is so we can fully understand what you both have experienced, because there's a lot.
Yes. So in the movie Hotel Rwanda tells the story of our adoptive father, Paul Rusesabagina, who was a hotel manager during the genocide in 1994. And he used the hotel he was managing to open up the doors for whoever could make it to the front doors. He provided shelter for them while the Interahamwe's who were outside were attempting to kill innocent people. And so he opened the doors, allowed for anyone who could make it to the front doors to come in, sheltered them for 76 days of the genocide. And using everything that he could, whether it was his words, was giving the killers a bottle of alcohol for them to leave one more day, and anything that he could to keep them away from by protect the people inside the hotel. At the end of the genocide, everyone was evacuated from the hotel and brought to refugee camps. And at the time, my sister Anaïse and I were still with our biological parents in the beginning of the genocide until they too were killed. And we were reunited with our adoptive father, Paul Rusesabagina, and our adoptive mother and the rest of our family now in the refugee camp. And that's where they found us and rescued us, essentially, and then raised us as their own children. So that's the story of Hotel Rwanda, is how our father saved 1,268 people in his hotel. And then how...
If I can add something quickly, just another layer of context. I don't know if most of your audience know kind of the way our country is. So we have two major ethnic groups, the Tutsi and the Hutu. And when the genocide happened...
Just understand the difference between these ethnic groups.
So these two ethnic groups their differences are arbitrary. They're a kind of fake line. So we were colonized or under Belgian rule for almost 60 years when the Belgians started colonizing the Congo, and then they came to Rwanda. And when they arrived in Rwanda, they decided they were looking at people, and they saw if you happen to be maybe tall, slender, with a slender nose, you will be Tutsi. And if you are shorter, maybe with a flatter nose, then you're a Hutu. And that was not real, and they divided our country. You divide to conquer, and that's what colonialism was about. And they gave favorism to the Tutsi, who actually, to Tutsi people who were the minority after these divisions. And over our colonial experience, the Tutsi had all the favors. And then when we gained independence, the Belgians favored the majority, which were Hutu. In our language, Hutu means peasant. And so in our culture, Hutus and Tutsi all live together. We have the same religion, same language. We celebrate our marriages the same way. We are actually one of the most homogeneous culture or country in the entire African continent. But yet we had this division of you are called Tutsi and you're called Hutu. And your ethnicity came from your father. So let's say if my husband is Hutu, my children will be Tutsi. Hutu. If her husband is Tutsi, her children are going to be Tutsi. Yet we're sister. And now we have our kids who are two different ethnic groups. So it just, that's kind of how complex this creation was of the Belgians. And you had to have this in your identity card. So fast forward after our independence, the Hutu people gain power. And from 1960, early 1960, late 50s, until 1994, the Hutu people had power. They used ethnicity as a scapegoat to really remain in power and Tutsis were the victim of that. So we had over maybe 2 or 3 big exile of Tutsi who had to leave to the Congo, in Burundi, in Uganda, because they were called Tutsi. Our own mom, our adoptive mom, at some point was kicked out of school because she was Tutsi. So at the end of the day, they're just names, but in reality, we're the same people. And so when the war erupted in the genocide in 1994, the Hutu rebels who were Karine called Interahamwe, they're called Interahamwe, they started killing many people in the city, but also around the country. And Paul Rusesabagina is a Hutu man. And when the war started as well, too, the international community turned its back on us. This hotel that Paul, our father, had was a Belgian hotel, and it was a place where all the diplomats and all the wealthy people, businessmen and others who come to our country will stay there. And then on April 7th, the war begins and everybody is evacuated. And then you have this empty hotel. And because he was a Hutu man, he used his privilege in the society at the time where being a Hutu was a privilege. You had more privileges, let's say, to welcome Tutsis and Hutu who were being persecuted by these rebel groups, this rebel group.
So they were persecuting both groups?
They were persecuting, first they were going after the Tutsis as an attempt to eliminate the Tutsis, but they were also going after Hutus who were not willing to partake in the killing.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So that so he used that hotel too. That's why he saved people. Of course, it's amazing. He was very brave, but on top of that, he put his life at risk as well too, because he could have just taken his family and gone and go back to Belgium, other places where he could have evacuated. But he stayed in Kigali and negotiated, because he used the power of words. My father didn't believe and still doesn't believe in violence and in weapons. He believes that words can solve solutions, they can solve problems, and that's what that was his motto until this day. And so he negotiated with these people, these people who were rebels. They wanted to have booze, they wanted to have cigarettes, they wanted to have these cigars from Europe. And so he would exchange some of this to ensure that they don't come to his hotel. And through these the genocide, he really used his words to save the people. And so that's the background. That's what makes it so complex, the genocide to people, because then you had families, who were separated. Imagine our kids, one a Hutu, Tutsi, families who killed each other because of the brainwashing and the hate that had been created over the last 40 years, saying, oh, Tutsi people are bad. But inherently, all of us are one people. We are one culture. We speak one language. There's intermarriage for the last 100 years. And so this war is really, it should not have happened because we're the same people. But it happened because of power and people wanting to greed. And that's really the push to hate often also, and that led to the worst consequences of hate speech and all these things. And this is where it got to the genocide.
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines, the world's most responsible currency, the right way. Because the future depends on it.
How old were you two when your parents were murdered?
I was 1 year old.
Okay.
And I was 2 years old. So
were you also fortunate not to be murdered? Because they did murder a lot of children.
Yes, they did. They did. And we were saved by people who lived around our house, our parents. Actually, the people who saved our family were also mixed, Hutu and Tutsis. They carried us on their backs, these 2 little girls that they had found in their neighborhood. and walked on foot to refugee camp until they're able to connect with other in our family.
Yeah, by the time our adoptive parents found out that we were at the refugee camp, they learned that we were skinny. We had like not eaten much for a while. We were surviving on barely, oatmeal and whatever crumbs you can find. So us, along with so many other children who were left behind or whose families were killed, were in a terrible condition. So as much as we're grateful to be alive, we're also recognized as so many other children were just as in terrible situation or were killed in this in the same way that our parents were killed.
What are the numbers? How many people were killed in the genocide?
1 million.
1 million.
Yeah, 1 million. And the conversation...
Oh, wow.
And in 3 months only.
Yeah. And they were killed with machetes, in the most gruesome way you can ever think, They would create a big hole, and just chop people off and put them in these holes. Family members had to go dig to find where their loved ones had been, to find their remains. After the genocide, you had bodies on streets where dogs were just eating bodies after the genocide. And
so there was a lot of rebuilding to do after. So by the end of the genocide in July of 1994, you can imagine a country that's just gone through such atrocious time, and the country had to be rebuilt, and there had to be some type of reconciliation between both groups as well.
Yeah.
And that happened?
Well, this is a debate that people have, right? And something that's important, you mentioned Judy Rivers and her talk at the Also Freedom Forum. And, Kagame was something that they mentioned is Kagame during this war, he was one of those people who had been forced to exile with his family in the first rounds of persecution after independence. And something we need to know is the
Kagame,
genocide.
The president of Rwanda.
Kagame is currently the president. Something that happened, the genocide actually happened amidst a civil war. And Kagame also and his people were called the FPR, that's the name of their group, were fighting to get back into the country from the early 1990s. And right before the genocide started on April 6th, they had peace talks in Tanzania to allow Kagame and his people and all the other Tutsi who had been exiled to come back into the country. Kagame did not want to sign these peace talks, and the president flew back to Rwanda. His plane was shot, and that was declared the genocide. It is known that the group that shot the plane of the president is Kagame's group, the FPR, but this is something that we don't talk about in our country. And it's important to know that because when the war started, then you have all these guys who were outside to start to come back. They were fighting to stop the internal rebel fighting. But at the same time, too, on their path to Kigali, with Kagame's leadership, they were killing many Hutus. Innocent Hutus. Just because you're a Hutu, you're killed. And so we call what happened in Rwanda the Rwandan genocide, because a Rwandan who was Hutu was killed sometimes because he was just Hutu. A Rwandan who was Tutsi was killed because he was Tutsi. And it was either by the Interahamwe, which were associated with the old regime, or often by the FPR, which is this new Kagame's people. And this is what Judy River was talking about, because it makes the history even much more complex, because it's not just one side that was a victim. It was actually both sides that were victims of the genocide. And when it ended, Kagame and we have to give credit in that sense that he did stop kind of the mass killing and calm things down, took Kigali, and then that's how really he's been in power since 1994, officially since 2001. But in those years between 1994 and 2001, it became another round of major persecution where many Hutus had to leave the country and went in exile to the Congo. And anybody who was influential in society, who had done something as Hutu men or Hutu women, mostly Hutu men were targeted, would get killed. And so our father, Paul Rusesabagina, learned in 1996 that they were going to come after him and kill him. And these people were the current people in power today, the regime. And so a general who had been friends of his told him, if you don't leave today, you will be killed tomorrow. And
it's so they had uncovered this plan to assassinate him. And the sad thing is that our father had protected people during the genocide. He has saved lives during the genocide. And not only him, but so many other Hutus who had also done the same things in protecting and sheltering whoever they could throughout that period were being targeted because they were Hutu, because they were influential, because they were known in the community. And so that's what led to our father and our family having to escape Rwanda to Belgium because of the assassination attempts against his life.
It's very hard to comprehend how a group of people can suddenly one day rise up and start massacring others. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to comprehend that. As part of that kind of truth and reconciliation, has there any study been done into this? How does it happen?
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of study that have been on, how do you almost like brainwash people to believe that you can kill your own family members almost, right? And this is where hate speech and this fear of the other, and and propaganda, very similar to what people in Europe have learned about Nazi Germany and the propaganda against the Jews. That kind of propaganda against the Tutsi was being created by the old regime. And so people were scared. They were scared to lose their jobs. They were scared that if these Tutsis come, people were already very poor, So this thing was cooked. It didn't happen in one night. It was cooked over, a few decades of propaganda. And, that's what declenched the genocide, and then you have these guys who've been also out of the country for most of their lives, who've been in the jungle for most of their lives. They also have been conditioned to believe that the people internally in the country are not good as well too. So it's a almost two-side thing, and after going to your question of reconciliation, once the genocide ended, there were the court called the Gacaca court, which is a traditional way in Rwanda of solving problems. So in a little village, you'll take the elders and people come together and say, well, Peter stole my cow, and like Carine will talk. So there was a conversation, and they use this type of mediation to mediate genocide crimes, which, is kind of insane. And they also was International Criminal Court, the ICTR, what is the name?
The International Criminal
Court. The tribunal in Tanzania that also started persecuting the people the main leaders of the former regime, who also engaged in this major propaganda, who engaged in, killing people. But this court only looked at one side. And so this reconciliation only happened from one side, where the Tutsis were the victim, but there was never any reconciliation, any acknowledgement of Hutu being also a victim of this war.
Right.
And so I believe personally that we never really had true reconciliation, because only one part got to get their side, their story heard, but the other, still to this day, their story is ignored, because the winner gets to tell the story. And this is what really Judy Rivers' talk was about, is that, today we only hear the story of the winner, Kagame.
Well, he's seen as a hero to a number of people, right?
Yeah, when Anaïs explained that he brought the genocide to an end, right? The killings ended when they marched into Kigali. And so many people, and then of course afterwards the reconstruction and the rebuilding and the installment of these Gacaca courts, the old systems to try to bring some kind of justice to the people. There was a lot of hope from people. There was a lot of hope in his leadership at the start. And it's like, okay, this guy is here now, maybe things will change. But that quickly changed when not only as more people came to light with what had happened when Kagame and his army marched into Kigali and killed a lot of people on their way and wanted justice, and those people were being persecuted or chased or killed for trying to tell their stories. And then first rounds of elections happen, he wins by upward to 90% in the elections. Then another elections happen, and again in the 90s, victories. And all of this, of course, shows that there's a manipulation in the way that people like, and the actual how he's perceived by the people, or how popular he really is. If he was popular, there wouldn't need for that manipulation.
Yeah, he quickly started cracking down on media, in the early 2000s, late 90s, cracked down on media, cracked down on independent justice system. And, that's where a lot of people started leaving the country because of all these changes. And in the meantime, parentheses, he's going to the Congo since the late 90s, bombing refugee camps of Hutu because he argued that they were one or two of some few people who happened to be part of the Interahamwe, these Hutu rebels. And so that was his excuse to go to the Congo, because he wanted to make sure these people don't ever come back again. But in doing so, he bombed the refugee camps and also started looting in the minerals in the Congo. And so it's been his excuse until this day. He's known as this very strong military guy and with a lot of intelligence, who had supported the United States, United Kingdom, and European countries over the last 30 years, militarily, economically, and all what you can think about. Until this day, he's still looking for these rebels that left in 1994. These guys are, probably like, 1,000 group of guys who've been in the jungle for the last 30 years with little resources. He has all the resources, but he's used them as a way to enter the Congo and loot the country of the minerals, but as an excuse is we're trying to protect the people who survived the genocide.
Okay, so just to be perfectly clear, he is crossing the border into the Congo with his army, and he's killing and butchering people for minerals and resources.
Yes. And those minerals are what we need for our phones, right? All the 3 tins, they call them.
Tantalum, call that other things. Yeah.
And so in the same time, in the late 90s, when he started going into the Congo under the pretext of going after the Interahamwes who had killed people during the genocide, he stayed and continues stealing all these minerals, which he's still doing today. And those are the minerals that have also become even more important over the past 30 years with the growth of technology and the development of technology. So it was the perfect excuse for him to remain there and to stay there until now in order to continue this theft, really.
So what are these 3 T's?
There's tantalum. That's the one I know very well.
I'd never heard of it before.
Tungsten and tantalum.
Tantalum I'd never heard of before.
Oh, that's one of the main things that you need for the phones. It's like some of the main...
So the battery, one of them is for battery. It's a conductor. Basically, not only for our phones, but our laptops, for medical tools, for airplane-like technology. All of our tech today requires these 3 minerals in order to function.
Right, tantalum is a chemical element. It has a symbol Ta and atomic number 73. It's named after the Tantalus, a figure in Greek mythology. Tantalum is very hard, ductile, lustrous, blue-grey, transition metal that's highly corrosive resistant. Okay, so you can see why it's used. Connor, could you just do a bit of research about, you might have to go into ChatGPT. Oh, here we go, into phones. Tantalum is used to manufacture the anodes in smartphone capacitors. Could you look up the size, like what size of industry that is for Kagame?
If you look at the 3 T's.
For Rwanda. Oh, the 3 T's. It might be a ChatGPT thing.
So in the meantime, as there's this looting is happening, the international community also felt so guilty that they did not help during the genocide. And so from 2000, this guy being Kagame gets praised by the international community. He was invited in all the platforms with, best friend with Tony Blair, and he was everywhere, welcomed because he was this hero, this guy who stopped the genocide. And Rwanda received a lot of money. The amount of money that we received over the last 30 years. We should not be still the 26th poorest country in the world, and the investment that has happened. But the government has been stealing from its people, despite, and the people were not willing to see. And I think there's this guilt going back to Arsenal, what we're talking about, there's this guilt of, of let's give a chance to this country to see what it can become under the leadership. But Kagame's type of leadership embodies everything that the United Kingdom, that the West in general, is against.
Yeah, of course.
And they pushed that aside because they wanted that good story, and he was giving them that good story. And they were also in because a lot of these minerals are coming back to this part of the world.
Yeah, so let's just read this. Rwanda's tantalum industry generates significant income, with local economic contributions from artisanal and small-scale mining being substantial. In 2015, the injection of more than $39.5 million into local economies via miners' income was a major stimulus for micro, small and medium enterprise and the government. Rwanda's mineral export revenues have surged, growing from 71 million in 2010 to 1.1 billion in 2023. But that tantalum, is it all taken from the Congo, or is it Rwanda as well?
I mean, the majority from the Congo, right?
Can we find out that? Can we just chat GPT this?
Yeah. We have some mines in Rwanda, but not to the amount. Like, we have some minerals a little bit, but not to the amount that can allow you to have such income and returns from this. And we also, at some point, were top producers of diamond. We don't have diamond in Rwanda. So, but a lot of these things are stolen from the Congo and then go through Rwanda, branded as Rwandan, and then sent to the Middle East, and then it goes to Europe and to the United States. And so Rwanda is a vehicle. All these minerals come through Rwanda and they become rebranded as Rwandan. But really, if you bring geologists or people who look under the ground, they would tell you that there isn't much of these critical minerals under our land.
Right. So, what are we seeing here, Connor? Rwanda.
So most of the mines are in the Kivu region, so in eastern DRC, which is where many of the people who fled after the genocide ended up in. So in that region, in the DRC, right at the border, on the other side of the border. And so that's obviously where Kagame also marched into after the genocide, and that's also where all of these mines are located. So they're taking them from the Congo and then bringing them across the border, labeling them as Rwandan minerals and exporting them as Rwandan minerals.
Well, what is the status of the Congo government, and what is their relationship with Rwanda? Because you would have thought, hold on a second.
It's actually quite interesting. So, I don't like this guy Kagame. He's a killer, but this guy has fought a lot. So before coming to Rwanda, he fought with Museveni. So he fought in the war in Uganda.
The president
of Uganda, Museveni. And then they liberated the country. Now, Uganda has been under dictatorship for the last 40 years, but so they supported them. And then they came to Rwanda. The genocide happened, and the genocide stops. They liberated Rwanda. And then they went into the Congo with Kabila the father, who we call him Kabila the father because he was killed a couple years later and his son became the president. And when he was fighting with the Congolese groups, they entered the Congo through Goma, and then they marched all the way to Kinshasa because at the time there was a really bad dictator called Mobutu.
I know that name.
And so Mobutu had savaged the country, stolen everything, and it was a very corrupt place, and the people of the Congo had been, under repression for a really long time. And so with Kabila, with the support of Kagame and his army, they removed Mobutu. And then now you have Kabila and the Rwandans. And a couple years later, I don't know what happened, but Kabila suddenly died and his son became president. And around that time, the Rwandan government had high-level people in the Congolese government who were Rwandan. At some point, the chief of the Congolese army was a Rwandan man who became 10 years later the Minister of Defense in Rwanda. So the Rwanda has its ties with Congolese politics in Kinshasa, and that's ever since they helped remove this guy, Mobutu. And over the years, of course, the Congolese government have tried to remove them. They've collaborated with Rwanda in times. They've fought with Rwanda. There's always something happening. But the Rwandan government has had a grip on Congolese politics, or have meddled in those politics for the last 30 years. And we are seeing this today again. And also in the Congo, sadly, the leadership, these guys who took power over mostly one guy, Kabila, the son, Joseph Kabila, they were also very corrupt. So the poor Congolese people have had a corrupt government over the last 30 years, and another corrupt government trying to attack and steal their resources. Now they're in a really bad position.
And now with the increase of the attacks in the eastern DRC in recent months, the Congolese government has been trying really hard to not only get international support to stop the Rwandan invasion from continuing, to get the Rwandan army out of the country. They're engaged in a lot of diplomatic talks with like other African countries, with Europeans, with Americans, trying to get support in protecting their sovereignty, but also really mobilizing the youth and the people to stand up. They're saying, okay, over millions of people have been killed in the past 2 decades only for these minerals, and a lot of it being led by Rwanda and Uganda. So it's finally time to stand up. And so the Congolese are standing up for themselves. The only thing is that there is also a lot of corruption and a lot of inefficiency within the government that's making it harder for them to stand up to the Rwandan invasion.
This is, I'm sure your audience has heard of the big critical mineral deal that the Trump administration is trying to broker with Rwanda, with the Congo. And the Congo wants to work directly with the United States, directly with the EU and other countries, so that their minerals are not stolen through Rwanda, so they can get the benefits of what
Rwanda is getting.
What their land has.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of the Congolese are trying, but in order to be able to have this critical mineral deal, you also have to have peace in the region. So you have 2 deals happening right now: a peace deal to stop the fighting that would go along with a critical mineral deal that between the United States and the Congo, where the Congolese government can actually benefit directly with their resources in a way that doesn't go through Rwanda.
I just want to read what Com's brought up. The decades-long conflict in eastern DR Congo has intensified since January, when M23 staged an unprecedented offensive seizing the cities of Goma and Bukavu, sparking fears of wider regional war. Rwanda said that its forces act in self-defense against the Congolese army and allied militias, some of which accuses of links to the 1994 Rwanda genocide. DR Congo has also accused Rwanda of illegally exploiting its mineral deposits, which Rwanda denies. At the end of the last week, DR Congo and Rwanda signed an agreement to respect each other's sovereignty and come up with a draft peace deal by Friday. The agreement in Washington, D.C. came about after the government in Kinshasa turned to the United States for help in exchange for access to mineral deposits. And both sides now expect significant investments facilitated by the U.S. government and private sector. Meanwhile, DR Congo and M23 group said last week that they were committed to peace, expressing hopes that a permanent ceasefire could be reached. More than a week of talks mediated by Qatar have been described as a frank and constructive. Congolese Arsenal fan, ironic, Trezor Kudabika, who is part of the Gunners for Peace campaign, said that the peace negotiators would not change their ultimate target of getting the club to end the Visit Rwanda deal. There we go. Some way or another, we will find a way to end this conflict, but is not the right moment for Arsenal to keep this deal. I think we can all agree with that. So that's good. Has he got it on his shirt there, Con? Yeah.
They've been covering the Visit Rwanda part. The fans have been, and we've been speaking to many different fans from Arsenal to try to get them to stand up to this deal as well.
This is interesting. Sorry, Bayern Munich fans held up a banner which translates as "Visit Rwanda. Whoever looks on with indifference is betraying the values of FC Bayern."
Very important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin.
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with Casa.
Yeah. No,
So the fans, when
absolutely.
they see what's happened, I give them credit, they're calling out their team's management and they don't want that. But somehow the people at the top don't see it the same way.
We should just go and create 20,000 of those armbands and stand
Yes.
outside the Emirates Stadium and hand them out. Because I think that could create change. That would be embarrassing for the club.
Yeah. Well, what happened, over the last couple of years in the United Kingdom here has allowed more people to understand the challenges and understand what Rwanda is like. The refugee deal that was talked about 2-3 years ago. This refugee deal, which basically would take refugees
Asylum seekers.
asylum seekers coming to the United Kingdom and send them to Rwanda, and Rwanda would get paid for that. And it's against.
And the thing is, the need to find a solution for the migration issue. We understand that there has to be a solution addressed by the government here.
Always felt like a weird program.
But sending them to a dictatorship that's not only waging war in the neighboring country, that is like gelling opposition, arbitrarily detaining its own people, that wins elections by 99%. I mean, everything that we know and that's been reported both by international institutions, by the UK government and other governments, there's too much information about the dictatorship of Rwanda to just say, well, we'll send asylum seekers there and just make it their problem, when we know that these people will not be treated justly or humanely, really. And in fact, I think there is also evidence of people who had been shot for protesting food ration, from refugees who had been sent to Rwanda in the past, who had been literally shot for asking for food. So
yeah, it gives you a different perspective. Obviously, I heard about the program to send illegal migrants to Rwanda to use as a deterrent. But those people in government who were working on that policy and knew that policy must have known Paul Kagame, what he's been doing, the war that they're raging across into the Congo, that they're stealing minerals. It feels very weird that a British government would try and implement such a campaign to send people there. It's like, are they so stupid that they don't know?
Yeah.
Or are they complicit in holding up another dictatorship? It's just weird.
It's complicity. It's complicity, because another interesting detail is that you saw M23 in the article there. So until really March, people talked about M23 backed by Rwanda, but Rwanda never admitted that they were backing this rebel group. But in 2012, this similar invasion happened, and the United Kingdom essentially stopped aid funding to Rwanda. And within a minute, the killing stopped in the area. And we knew clearly that where was the funding to this rebel group coming from Rwanda. Today, we're talking about peace talks between the Congo and Rwanda, not peace talks between the Congo and M23. So Rwanda has actually come to the table, finally acknowledged, or some way indirectly acknowledged, their support of this rebel group and in the killing of the folks. So the government that tried to do this refugee deal is the same government that sanctioned Rwanda in 2012 and that stopped the funding. So they knew who they're working with, but it's complicity in supporting a dictator. And I've been doing this work. This work in terms of advocacy and teaching people about our country, but I'm still very confused as to why. What is the end game? Why spend so much money? Why support this dictator when you don't support other dictators? When so much backlash can happen when the evidence is there. If it was another country that you never heard of, maybe it would be easier. But what do you get in return? And I still ask myself that question by supporting and helping this dictator. That's the question that I have, and maybe you can help us find that out through your work.
Well,
but it's crazy.
I don't know. We've seen this in football. Football is a money-driven sport. It's a results-based business. There's always this desire, need to claw more and more money into pay player wages. And so we got to a point now where we have clubs that are owned by, like Newcastle is essentially owned by the Saudi regime.
Yes, yeah.
Now, we're meant to have a program called the Fit and Proper Persons Test. By the way, I, as an owner of a 7th tier English club, have to pass the Fit and Proper Persons Test. My question to them is, how does the Saudi government pass a fit and proper persons test? But money talks.
Yeah.
I mean, the Saudi government were given the World Cup. I can't, for the same reason, I couldn't understand why Qatar got the World Cup. They'll build 7, 8, 9 stadiums that won't be used again. I can't understand why Saudi have been given a World Cup. Well, I can, because I'm now aware of other programs where they're investing money into football. Look, it's all corruption.
Yeah.
Money talks. But I cannot understand a club like Arsenal. I can understand naively signing a sponsorship deal, being approached by the Rwandan government, maybe not having met amazing people like you or knowing the background, not have done the research on what's happened on the border. They'll certainly be aware of the backlash, yet they continue to take the money. And I that is a problem for me. And I would have thought it shouldn't be too difficult to spark a big enough backlash that Arsenal fans say, no, we don't accept this. I would hope.
Well, it started. And this has been ongoing for the last 2-3 years. When this refugee deal was happening, the fans stood up. But also our own story with our father was another way for them to see what Rwanda is like, because many people had heard of Hotel Rwanda. They had heard of my dad's work. And now we didn't get to that earlier, but so we escaped Rwanda, went to Belgium in the late 90s. And Hotel Rwanda came out in 2004, 2005. And it gave the platform to my dad to talk about the challenges in our country, this rise in autocracy, and all these bad things that are happening.
The need for reconciliation.
The need for reconciliation. Because what he really wants is to do a truth and reconciliation that can bring sustainable peace in our country, but in our region. Rwanda was saying they already did that. But he did that. But he became, at first people welcomed him, but then they're like, yo, shut up. We don't want to hear you anymore. We come Kagame, let's do these deals. Kagame is it's much easier to talk with, again, money talks. My dad had no money to give to people, and, fast forward to 2020, during the pandemic, my dad was lured to Burundi, thinking that he thought he was gonna go to Burundi, but he ended up going to Rwanda. And he was lured there because the Rwandan government got a fake bishop who was actually a spy to befriend him for 2 years. And my dad trusted this man when he invited him to go speak to churches about truth and reconciliation in the country. And
they kidnapped him?
They kidnapped him.
Yeah, so before that, for 15 years, our dad had been speaking out about what's happening in Rwanda, trying to call for this truth and reconciliation process, for peace and stability in the region, and also for accountability for what the government of Rwanda is doing. And so they used this spy to lure him to Rwanda. So it was an entire kidnapping operations that was led by the intelligence of Rwanda. They took him they lied to him that he was going to speak in Burundi, but instead the plane landed in Rwanda. And upon landing in Rwanda, first on the plane he was drugged, so he fell asleep. By the time he landed in Rwanda, he realized that he was at the airport in Kigali and starts shouting, and instantly guards barged into the plane. They tied him up, and our dad was almost 70 years old at the time. They tied him up, blindfolded him, and threw him in a truck and took him to a torture house where they tortured him for 4 days, trying to get him to confess to crimes he did not commit.
To give them a reason to put him in jail?
Try him.
To try him. And on August 31st, Karen and I were in D.C. together because, it was the pandemic in Washington, D.C. And we woke up to the news of our father, Paul Rusesabagina, alleged terrorist found in Rwanda with his handcuffed and his face swollen. We're like our dad on TV. I'm like, wait, what is happening? How did he end up there? It was very, very scary. And this is where our kind of activism work, or this thing that we've been doing, began, because our dad was taken. She was working in finance in New York. I was doing global health, very different from what we're doing today. But that was the impetus for us to start speaking out and to to get him out of prison.
But you became enemies of the state
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yes.
So waking up to this news where basically like all these headlines were saying Paul Rusesabagina, the hero of Hotel Rwanda, is accused of terrorism by the Rwandan government. And we knew, obviously, for all these years that the government had tried to kill him. And before, they had broken into our home in Brussels. They had tried to silence him from speaking out on all these platforms that he was speaking at. So we instantly knew that this was another one of their like tricks to get the international community not to listen to our father, to basically abandon him and allow them to falsely accuse him and try him and convict him so that he's essentially silenced forever. And that's when we started speaking out. We started not only trying to set the record straight about what our father had been doing all these years, what had happened to him, how he got to Rwanda, as we were able to conduct investigations and to understand how the kidnapping occurred.
We found out that the plane that brought my dad to Rwanda was actually paid by the office of the president.
Like there's a receipt.
There's a receipt.
We have a receipt.
There's a receipt
Office
of
the
this.
president of Rwanda.
Yeah.
How long was he held for?
For 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
Yes.
I'm assuming in terrible conditions. And
Yes, he was in solitary confinement for 11 months. He could not leave. And then through our advocacy and the pressure that the international community put, because they removed him out of solitary, but he was in isolation. He was in an aisle by himself. He
wasn't allowed to talk to anyone, even within that aisle.
Yeah.
trying to break him.
At some point, he was allowed to go outside, and in the court where other prisoners were, and they would put him in a corner and far away from everybody else. But he had to get some sunlight. We learned a lot about the UN rules, and we found out about the Nelson Mandela rule that you cannot keep a prisoner in solitary confinement for more than 15 days. And so we did a lot of outcry and spoke to many people. And this is how we came across the Arsenal fans, because we wanted anybody to help us. And we wanted to tell our story and remind people what Rwanda is actually about. Not this beautiful country that's investing in major clubs, and that there's more. There's a darker story to that. And there was an education. We had to do big education to many people, including the Arsenal fans. And Karen spent a lot of time here talking to folks, and
there was a whole propaganda campaign by the government of Rwanda to counter everything we were saying, essentially. I mean, they would, every time we would speak to any news channel about the situation of our father and how he was being treated in prison, they would send their own government officials to come and try to say that we're complete liars and we're making this up, and in fact he's a terrorist and he's killing Rwandans. And so they were just constantly going after everything we were saying in order to discredit us as well. But at the same time, we had truth on our side, right? Our father had been kidnapped. He was being falsely accused. He was being put on trial for completely fabricated accusations. And then throughout this whole time, the trial did happen, and our father refused to participate because he said, I don't have access to lawyers and can't even read the case against me.
He couldn't even read the case against him before the trial
began. They refused for him to, they're like, you're accused of terrorism. Here's a big pile, but like, you can't have this pile.
You can't see what we're accusing.
You can't see what we're accusing.
We have a legit justice system, but you can't have lawyers. So all these things were done, and it exposed really the true weakness of the Rwandan government, and exposed the challenges everyday Rwandans are facing. Because my dad was at the peak of that, but so many other people are don't have lawyers, don't have their rights are broken when they're in prison or outside of prison. So my dad was an example of everything that's happening underneath
the
torture
arbitrary
and
detention.
And so this idea that Rwanda is a good country where you have a good justice system that is democratic, but you still win by 98%. Like these things were starting to come out, and it happened at the time where this refugee deal was happening. So it brought more attention to Rwanda. Oh, also Rwanda became the head of CHOGM. How do you call that again? Like
The CHOGM,
they had CHOGM in Rwanda in that time too, where all the Commonwealth countries, former Commonwealth countries, all get together. So there was a lot of visibility on Rwanda, even though these bad things are happening. And so we took advantage of this visibility to also tell our side of the story, like Karine was saying.
We understood. Our dad used to always say that one of the ways to keep political prisoners alive is to keep talking about them. So we were telling his story in every platform that we could, trying to remind people of what he did during the genocide, how he became a public figure, why the regime went after him, and why he was sitting in prison where he was sitting. And that was the constant, telling of his story and getting people to care about what was happening to him and to other people who were detained in the same situation. That was the awareness that we were raising. And so we were knocking on politicians across the world and news media across the world and people in general. Like if we were sitting in front of you, it'd be like, what can you do? What platform? How many people can you reach? How can you tell his story?
Because they have disappeared a lot of people.
Yes, many people have disappeared. So I don't know if you heard the term transnational repression. It's the idea of autocratic regime going across borders to take dissidents and critics, killing them. So basically going across border to do bad things. And that happens physically, but also in the digital world. It happens through Pegasus, for instance.
Yes.
And
just explain Pegasus to people who... So on this podcast, you are definitely hearing me talk about Bitcoin a lot. Well, why? We live in a really strange time with governments driving inflation with their reckless spending and endless money printing. There is a way out of this. There is a way to protect your money, and that is by stacking Bitcoin. I've made loads of shows about Bitcoin. You can go and research this. You can go and read the books. But the truth is, it is the hardest money ever created. If you are interested in protecting your financial future, it's time for you to get on the Bitcoin train. I've been stacking Bitcoin personally and through my businesses since 2017. It's protected me, it's secured my family's future, and it also strengthens all of my businesses. So if you want to start stacking Bitcoin, where do you do it? Well, for me, it's with Gemini. They're a fully licensed, full reserve exchange and custodian, so they give you a secure way for you to buy and own your Bitcoin. There's no risks and no funny business. So if you're serious about stacking Bitcoin the right way, head over to Gemini.com, which is GEMINI.com.
You should explain what it is.
It could be here on our phone. Now.
So Pegasus is a military-grade spyware that governments purchase it's purchased from government to government in order to spy on people. But the Pegasus spyware is a really strong technology in that if your phone is infected with the spyware, they can have access to not only obviously all your emails, messages, texts, whatever, but they can also access your camera. And let's say if I have my phone right here, they will be able to look at you. They will be able to look at me. They will be able to listen to the conversation we're having in the room. And you would never know that this is what they're doing. There's no way for you to know that your phone's been infected. They can just do so by sending you a text message that disappears, and then you'll never find out that your phone was infected. So when I was at the Oslo Freedom Forum, I spoke in 2022 about my father's case and trying to get the world to stand up and to help in advocating for his release. And I remember on stage with Thor at the time, and we had before going on stage, I had given my phone to one of the Citizen Lab booth for them to, the Citizen Lab is an organization in Canada that does research and on spyware and protects activists and journalists who are being targeted. And they had figured out that my US phone had also been targeted with the spyware. And so the crazy part is that we were able to look at the analysis of everything that happened, the forensics analysis of everything that happened in the year prior from the moment my phone was infected. So just to go back, there's this moment in the Oslo Freedom Forum where we find out about my phone being infected. But a few months before that, I had also another group reach out to me about my Belgian phone being targeted with the spyware. So, and then my cousin who lived with me in Brussels at the time whose phone was also infected with the spyware, which is, I think it costs millions per license.
About $1 million per license. So they had $2 million spent in one house, in addition to all the
arsenal deals.
Who operates Pegasus?
It's the NSO group. Yeah. The NSO group is an Israeli group which deals with from government to government to share, to sell stuff.
And
it's kind of evil.
It's kind of evil. And they marketed this to actually, sadly, the United States, the United Kingdom, and other democratic countries also use that platform. And when it was first put out, it was for their audience was, the United States, United Kingdom, to go find terrorists and other bad folks.
Yeah.
But
it always starts there.
quickly, it was used to do more than just to finding these bad people. It was targeted to journalists, to activists like my sister.
A crazy example is, I think at one point we were meeting with the Belgian foreign minister in Brussels, and I went with my mom and my cousin, and the forensics analysis showed that the moment I walked into the room with the minister until the moment I walked out, the spyware was activated, which means that they were in the room with us. They needed to know the conversation we were having with the minister, which was really all about getting our father home. But that showed how much obsession but it's also, we're laughing about it now, but it's very scary that the same people who kidnapped my father, who tortured him, who were holding him hostage and also in solitary and all kinds of degrading treatment, were now also literally in my phone and listening to the conversations I was having in my living room or with my sister or family. It's
insane. There's this Israeli private company that is monetizing the spying and targeting of people who are advocating and pushing for more freedom around the world.
Yes.
It is evil.
It's evil. It's crazy. And this is where you wonder, why are the people that we vote here want to work with these kind of companies or dictators? And, this finding out about Karine's Pegasus, having Pegasus on her phone, it was during a time where many other news outlets with Amnesty International did a thing called the Forbidden Stories, where there was a leak of all numbers that were targeted. This is how they were able to find her Belgian phone number being targeted by Pegasus. And so a lot of stories were put out, much more, so people discover really what NSO was doing and the type of people they were working with. And finding her on her American phone number led the U.S. government to have more in-depth conversations about how do we really work with this NSO. And Carine, alongside with John from Citizen Lab, and there was, I think, a person from Google, they testified at the House Intelligence Committee that summer, and she shared her story. And some of the consequence of this hearing is that the U.S. government looked deeply into their relationship, and a couple months later, NSO had to dissolve. And so there was some accountability, but these companies, they just rebranded and they just, it's a question of redoing it differently, right? But I'm still pleased, though. I have to give credit for people to say, hey, let's take a step back and see, how are we working with these companies? And I think we need to have more leadership in the United States, in Europe, in the United Kingdom, all over the world, and to think about how do you support the victims of this malware, but also how do we put more boundaries on how this can be used, right? And often not everybody in government know these things. It's only a specific part of the intelligence that know these things. And for the United States, it was shocking that, one, their partner, because Rwanda is a partner to the United States, was spying on an American citizen,
That's unconstitutional as well. Is it the Fourth Amendment?
I'm not sure.
The spying of, it's a foreign government spying on an American citizen. I'm not sure if it's...
Okay.
I'm not sure,
But I wouldn't be surprised if the US government was also using it against
that
citizens.
Is the problem.
Let's
That
be
is
honest.
the problem. That is the problem. But
you have Rwanda using it against human rights defenders and journalists and so on. But then you also have all these governments purchasing that same technology and using it the way that they wish. Mm-hmm. One of the debates, at least at the European Parliament, about the regulation of the use of Pegasus was they were saying, well, what if we need to access a pedophile's phone number to catch them? Yeah, I think always. And to catch them, and before they kidnap a child and take them across the state. So they had a lot of reasons to say, well, we should have access to this technology. But then there are also ways to regulate the way that you access this technology. There is ways to, they should go through a court, and the court should give you permission to use it in order, there are ways
to mitigate this.
But the way that it had been used by a lot of dictatorships to just listen to, I don't know why the Rwandan government thought it was completely justifiable to put $2 million in our household with the spyware. We were literally just speaking to the media. We're speaking to government officials about our dad's freedom. That was it. So the fact that this is was so easily accessible for them, and also other regimes that use it against journalists. I mean, our lawyer in Rwanda was also being spied on. This is to say, like, they tried everything to listen to our conversations, and that shouldn't be so easily accessible. This spyware should not be just given out like this to be to target people who have done nothing wrong.
So thankfully, there's a silver lining to everything, I believe, and I think the silver lining, Karine became a voice for people who've endured that, and through speaking in the EU at the United States Congress, people are asking themselves these questions: how we do things differently. And I'm really proud of her to have that she was able to put these into conscience, because it could be their daughters too being spied by these spyware if they want to do something bad to an MP or to a congressman or congresswoman. And so these things have to be regulated differently. We have to talk about that it's happening, that our own government's also using this, and I'm sure they could probably using our own people as well too. It doesn't have to be very far away, but we have to be able to know that this is happening, and we have to talk about it. And that was, something that came out of it. People started reflecting a little bit more about the use of these technologies.
And so with pressure from the attention on the whole Pegasus, the reveal of the use of the Pegasus spyware, with the pressure from, at some point we had the Hollywood stars that participated in the film, that played in the film Hotel Rwanda, wearing T-shirts calling for our father's release, with the support from university students. And the media attention on our father's case after 2.5 years, he was finally, and the U.S. Congress putting pressure on the Rwandan government, and this international coordinated effort to put pressure on the regime, our father was finally released.
Excellent.
Yeah, and that's also how we know that pressure, including on these teams like Arsenal, like FC Bayern, like PSG, like the global pressure on these teams to end these types of deal is possible, and in order to get them to change their approach. And I think that's our hope, is that there will be enough pressure to change this.
You guys are very close with the Human Rights Foundation, because and obviously we met we were at the Oslo Freedom Forum recently. I'm pretty sure they said in one of their videos, I'm pretty sure, did Nicki Minaj pull out of a concert because of pressure?
Yes, they've done a really good job in calling out these celebrities who are getting paid, a lot of money to just go sing to dictators and others. And they put a lot of pressure on Nicki Minaj, among many other celebrities as well who've done similar things. They'll go to, a country, get flown in, spend 10 million, you just 10 million 1 hour concert, why not? But it means a lot, to the countries, because if celebrities can come sing to these dictators, then it gives them legitimacy. When Visit Rwanda is on Arsenal, it gives Kagame's regime legitimacy. It shows to the people of Rwanda, hey, we can do all this. Nobody's going to say anything. And this is what they wanted to do with our father. They wanted to show that if they can kidnap one of the main opposition or critic of the government, they would silence Rwandans inside and outside of the country. We have power over you. And on top of that, you know what? We can sponsor all these clubs. We can continue going to these big forums of Davos and others. And it's a way to try to break the people of their country so they don't fight. But what they don't know is that I think people don't get tired. I think people do want their freedom. And like us and like many others will not stop speaking up for this fight for freedom. And that's why they go in such great lengths to silence people, because they know that, it's not that easy. And at the end of the day, we want to be able to go back to our country one day. Yeah. The people inside Rwanda want to be truly free. It could take time, but it's not impossible. We've seen it in other countries. And so, yeah.
You need to overthrow a regime. Yeah. How important have the Human Rights Foundation been to the work you do?
Oh, they've been wonderful. I mean, on a personal level, they supported us a lot with this campaign. It's where Karine found out that her American phone number was also targeted by Pegasus. They used their resources to help us and advocate and voice and larger voice. They support activists through mental health support and other, and they helped me that personally. And through the community of HRF, which brings many other people who've endured similar things to us, sometimes even worse than what we've seen, we've connected with many people, and we know that it's by working together that things can change. And for me personally, because my sister was targeted by this malware, I was really interested in freedom technology. How can we keep ourselves more safe? How can we keep just in general, safe in the digital age? And I learned about Bitcoin, for instance. I didn't know. My very first time I arrived at the forum in 2022, I was like, what are these Bitcoin guys doing here? Like, we're talking about human rights. It's, we have political prisoner here. Like, there's some important things here. Well, these guys are just
we don't need the Bitcoin bros.
Quickly I learned where, Bitcoin is a tool to support activists fighting their own autocracy, people who've been debanked because of their work. Bitcoin has been able to help them. So on a professional level for me, I've also been able to grow through HRF and find my own voice, and what I care about is this really true freedom. And freedom comes from a financial perspective. It comes from a political perspective, from a speech perspective, and it's all around. That's my story with HRF, but I think Carine can tell her side of the story as well, too.
I think the Human Rights Foundation gives a platform to amplify your voices, amplify the stories of the victims of these dictatorships, but also it's a place where we really got to learn from others what works and what doesn't work. Mm-hmm. We've seen, listening to other people who are fighting for the release of their loved ones in other countries. What did they do that worked? What pressure points? What are the strategies? And so we supported each other and learned from others, and they, I hope, learned from us as well. And how do we achieve freedom? But it's also this community where you feel like people understand you. Oftentimes when we were advocating for our dad, like we were in this, we were obviously constantly worried about what was happening to him, what could happen to him tomorrow, and what else could we do? And we were just in this dark place, and we got to Oslo Freedom Forum and met other people who were also in trenches, but for a second, we got to look up and say, hey, we're alive. we're grateful to be alive. We can fight this. We can stand up together and continue. So there is this positive outlook in a time where there's so much difficulty and negativity around the work that we do. And also what I liked about, what I really think they do well as well is bringing humor to this. I think it's really difficult to bring humor to the story and the difficulties of fighting for freedom, and there's all these terrible topics we've discussed. But there is also a lot. I think, for example, during when the whole Pegasus story was revealed with the Rwandan regime spying on my phone, Thor made a joke on stage about Kagame, and literally like the next day we were hearing everyone in Kigali in the regime circle were just pissed that the Oslo Freedom Forum was laughing at them. So the fact is, like, it hits them in the right places. And so I think it's a community of people not only that amplify voices, but also where we get to learn from each other and be able to see this fight in a different prism.
It's pretty inspiring, the Oslo Freedom Forum. Every time, I think I've been 3 times in Oslo, but I've also been to the forum when they've had it in New York and once in Taiwan. Yeah. It's pretty inspiring.
It's very inspiring. And this community aspect that Carine talks about, you come and you meet these people, and then new things grow out of it, through these forums and these opportunities to meet others. Other ideas come up, and I think Carine should tell him about the World Liberty Congress, and that would not exist without a lot of HR support.
Through the Oslo Freedom Forum, we met all these other activists from authoritarian countries, and the World Liberty Congress was born from which is an organization of activists, pro-democracy leaders, journalists, human rights advocates from autocratic countries that are working together now to bring down the dictatorships. And so we've created this alliance of all these people in all these countries to also continue this learning, to continue this collaboration, to continue these efforts towards exposing what the regimes are doing. And it's, again, this was born at the Oslo Freedom Forum. It was born through the Human Rights Foundation. And it's a lot of work, but the fact is we're able to inspire each other and to continue to learn through this process.
Wow. So, obviously you want to return to Rwanda. I get that. I would love that for you more than anything. Do you think you'd go back and live there?
I would love to.
I would love to.
I would love to. The only thing is they would not keep us right today.
How do you replace someone like Paul Kagame? How do you get to the stage where you can have a proper democratic vote and he is ousted? Like, what is the reality here?
Well, the reality right now in Rwanda is speaking up. Even families don't talk to each other about politics because they're scared that somebody might hear and you can go to prison. So it's very, very, very repressed in the country. But I think it begins with people on the outside.
Okay.
Like
yourselves.
Like ourselves. We cannot go back to our country, but we have to use our voice to educate people around the world what our country is like. Our own community too needs to unite and to work together. And it's still very difficult because something that through transnational repression, I don't know if there's a word for this, but dictators use fear to divide communities. And so you'll hear that often communities of people that come from autocratic countries on the outside are divided because these autocratic they go at great lengths to make sure that if we're scared of each other, then we cannot sit together and unite. So for me, I believe that there is two things that need to happen. We need to ensure to work together within the Rwandan community, unite and take away this fear because we're all fighting the same guy. We all want to go back home. But also we need the support of non-Rwandan people. And this is where when we see teams like Arsenal popping up visit Rwanda and like in France and Germany and Spain, it doesn't make it easy for us. We need people to call out and to stop this kind of relationship to ensure that Kagame has less power internationally, less economic power. We need to stop this arms deal with Rwanda. I mean, the European Union has known that Rwanda was invading through, aggressing and doing these bad things in the Congo, and they're still signing bilateral arms deals. And so we need to stop this. And this is happening in the United States as well. And the United Kingdom was ready to send refugees, asylum seekers to Rwanda. We need that Belgian citizen, American citizen now, and citizens of these countries need to use their voice and to ensure that their leaders and our leaders here uphold our values. And many of them don't do that. And so we need to hold our leaders here accountable so they don't allow other bad guys to continue like Kagame. So it's a lot of work, but we cannot lose hope. Something what that situation showed us that nothing is impossible. And we've seen other countries around the world who've overthrown their bad leaders. And so it's a matter of time, but it takes unity among our people, but also the international community to support us. And again, back to Arsenal, it starts with them, not endorsing a dictator and showing their fans that they stand for democratic and human rights values.
Wow. Okay. Is there any part I've not asked you about that you wish I had?
No, I think we've covered everything.
I feel like it shouldn't be too hard to pressure Arsenal to do this. I feel like it shouldn't be too difficult to get this as a subject that's spoken about widely amongst Arsenal fans. I'd assume a lot of them don't really know about this. Yeah, well, listen, I will try and apply whatever pressure I can from here, from my platform I have. It's been great to get to know you both and have you as friends and hang out once or twice a year. Well, we had you in Bedford.
Yes, it was great. So,
and we'll get you back there for some more football. That could be your football team. But listen, just keep doing your thing. It's amazing what you do, and it's been great to get to know you and become a friend of yours. So, yeah, and Arsenal fans, stop wearing that shirt. Good luck and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.